Therefore, A, do you concede that power to the union in respect of every Indian state? We're not saying that you should concede that, no, this only exists for J&K, it exists for every Indian state, right?
The power is for all.
Once you concede that power to the union in relation to every Indian state, how do you ensure that, the kind of abuse that they apprehended, we are now not defining it for today, but what we lay down would be the law for the land.
But
it is revised by some larger bench at some point of time. But how do you ensure then that this power will not be
used, my lord, in case of others? My lord, that was my worry. I share your lordship's worry, and therefore, my lord, I started by saying that your lordships are dealing with a one-of-its-kind situation, which is not going to arise, my lord. And if, my lord, I point out, my lord, after...
Not one-of-its-kind situation. We have seen on the northern border, Punjab, very difficult times. Similarly, some states at different times in Northeast. All border states.
One of the states in Northeast presently.
Many
none of
times
them.
As because of whatever reasons, near the border, we can't choose our neighbors, as they often say. We have had problems.
Correct.
So the worry which Chief Justice expresses is that tomorrow, if there is a scenario of order, can each of these states face this problem?
And why each of these states only, my lord? It can happen to, for example, Madhya Pradesh or Gujarat or any state.
Your argument from the borders is what I'm testing. See, there are states which are on border of other countries where situation may not be very palatable. Now, at least those border states, I understood your argument that these border states are category by themselves. How do we distinguish between Jammu and Kashmir and any other border state?
I'll just, my lord, I'm grateful. I'll point out. My lord, none of the border states, take, my lord, northeastern states or Punjab, as your lordships gave an example. Northeastern states or Punjab or any other. Rajasthan has a border, Gujarat has a border.
What possibly is being pointed out, you can't say because it's a border state, so it has to be treated.
I'm not saying it, my lord, that's not the distinction I'm drawing.
Because then it's a very,
my lord, there are several border states, Gujarat, Rajasthan,
Himachal, Uttarakhand,
Himachal. I'm not, my lord, kindly don't misunderstand my submission that because it is a border state, it requires different treatment. My lord, kindly see the consistent, repeated situation which we are facing since decades on a daily basis is not happening in Gujarat or Northeast or any other border state. Here is a border state where one of our territory is occupied by Pakistan, or we have POK. I have given figures. What are the deaths taking place every year, right from 20 years before? This is a problem faced by the nation from decades, since decades, which we are, my lord, trying to, my lord, sort out or deal with. And I'll show, my lord, this is not, my lord, just, these decisions are never taken as knee-jerk reactions. There is always, my lord, policy considerations. Border state, this particular state being a different kind of a border state is one, but there are several considerations. And one of the consideration would be how to bring the youth in the mainstream. And I'll point out, my lord, everything was kept in mind and is implemented. And what we are seeing today is the result of that blueprint being implemented. My lord, after this decision, there were elections which took place of district development councils. There are 34,000 elected people. Democracy going to the grassroots. There are, large number of schemes which are introduced. The youth which used to be employed by the interest not inimical to India, maybe terror groups or whoever, and were paid, now are gainfully employed. There is always a blueprint. And I'll be able to show that blueprint working. I'm conscious of the fact that end would not justify the means. But your lordships can certainly see whether these policy considerations which decided the reorganization were correct or not. Because the government has acted with a blueprint, not only for reorganization, what would be done after reorganization and how Jammu and Kashmir would return to normalcy. And I'll be able to show the steps which are taken. Right now, my lord, I will deal with in three parts. My lord, the impression which is given to your lordship is that this has been reduced from state to union territory. Means there is a downgradation. And my lord, there are some other factually incorrect statements were made, my lord, by one of the council, my lord, who argued for reorganization, against reorganization, that we lost this, there is no representation, there is no consolidated fund of India, we can't participate in election of president, our seats in the parliament is gone.
Let's look at it at the first level, basic level, the textual level of the constitution. Let's go step by step. Then we'll go to the last part, namely, which was what motivated this decision. And there you have said that these are policy considerations. Look at the nature of the state, the history. You can't lose sight of all that. We must also deal with it at a textual level. Does Parliament have the power to convert an existing Indian state into a union territory? If it does have that power, how do you read Article 3? If you can just assist us on, that's the basic textual question.
Yes, but there are, my lord, specific judicial pronouncements on that.
No, but we will go to the judicial pronouncements.
Why
don't you first look at the text of the statute?
Before that, may I request your lordships to have a just bird's eye view of the Reorganization Act itself? No one has shown that, my lord, to your lordships. I want your lordships to see that.
You look at the Reorganization Act, that will provide us.
I'm not reading every part. I'm just taking your lordships through the titles. Lord, nobody has read, my lord.
First, that's worrying us. Let's look at the source of the power.
Kindly come to, my lord, Article 3.
Just in a minute or so.
Yes.
Just how you interpret
Article 3. Article 3.
Also, I would like to know whether it's some kind of what is the nature of exercise of that power? Is it a permanent exercise of power? Is it a temporary exercise of power? What is
No,
that?
it is, my lord. I must, Lord, let me answer that straight. Lord, this question was put in the parliament when the reorganization bill was passed. I'll just read, my lord, the statement of the honorable minister on the floor of the house.
So the union territory here is not intended to be a permanent territory.
No, my lord.
All right.
And that's what, my lord, I'm making.
Question number two.
Yes.
Number two. How impermanent is it? And question number 3, when are we going to have elections?
I understand, my lord. So that is why, my lord, I was going to show to your lordships the steps taken to ensure that we reach that stage. I will show those steps.
All right. Now let's go to Article 3.
Article 3, formation of new states and alteration of areas, boundaries, or names of existing states.
So wherever you read state, read union territory.
Union territory, except the provision.
So now let's read clause A in the light of that.
Yes, and my lord, this very reorganization has been subjected, and my lord, this honorable court has said that it is permissible. This reorganization act has passed the muster of your lordships under 3 and 4. The judgment I'll show. So there is a power of having 2 union territories out of 1 state, then B, increase the area of any state, diminish the area of any state, alter the boundaries of any state. But here, this would also result.
Does clause A contemplate a situation when the entirety of a state can become a union territory?
There are 2, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. And there is nothing, my lord, which prohibits.
Does clause A contemplate a situation where an entirety of a state can become, say, more than 1 union territory? What you have done?
It can, my lord. I'm not answering that question because that doesn't arise here.
Your argument is that because of explanation, we will have to read union territory.
Yes. And in a given case, my lord, I don't want to pitch that high.
Clause A, the problem. Form a new union territory, we will not read it as state. Form a new union territory, singular will include a plural. So form more than 1 union territory, no problem. Form a new union territory by doing what?
By separation of territory from any state. Territory means geographical area.
Right. So from the state of J&K, you carve out a territory and form, say, a union territory of Ladakh.
Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh. But I don't want to, my lord, pitch that high. But otherwise, it would not prohibit even a state being made union territory. But that's not the question we are dealing with, my lords.
So the first part of clause A, in other words, according to you, form a new union territory by separation of territory from any state.
And
contemplate a situation where you have a larger state and you contemplate the creation of a union territory by separating out a territory. In this case, you separated out a territory to form the union territory of Ladakh, and then the remaining you carved out and said this will be the union territory of...
It will not amount to reading. Suppose you had not carved out Ladakh and you had declared the whole thing as a UT.
Lord, there is no restriction in doing that. I don't wish to pitch it that high.
I'm going to test and understand. Suppose you create one UT only. Then it is form a new state by separation of territory from any state. That has not occurred. No UT has been carved out. Or by uniting two or more states or part of the state, or by uniting any of the territory into part of the state. How will it apply? Suppose you had not carved out Ladakh.
Possibly.
Whole state. So then the power would be the conversion of any state into a UT.
That possibly
The fact that you carve out a part of a state.
Possibly, Your Lordships are right. That is not that is possibly not contemplated, subject to. But form a new state, that is form a new union territory.
That's the proposition.
By separation of territory from any state. So separation is necessary.
So if you don't separate and create, you really, how do you contemplate converting a state into UT? And if, I'm just saying for the sake of argument, if that is not possible, can you do that by carving out a UT and making the other also a UT?
There is no restrictions. And this is how, my lord, it is understood by your lordships also. Because, for example, my lord, Assam, Tripura and Arunachal became UT first and thereafter became state. Assam remained a state. That's the distinction. But Assam could have also become a UT. There is no restriction.
That's what I'm saying. See, carving out Ladakh as a UT is, I would say, less complicated in its nature. So therefore, to test the proposition, I'm saying, suppose you don't carve out UT, Ladakh. You decide that the whole state should be a UT. So can you do that and say J&K state will remain as it is as boundary, but from state it becomes a UT? When we want it, we'll reconvert it back to the state.
My lord, my first reading is separation is necessary. That's my first reading.
That is what is a little...
Because that question we are not faced, my lord, right now in this.
So the question will arise to test it that if you cannot convert a state into a UT, then can you carve out a UT? It's fine. But in the bargain also say that what I could not do without carving out a UT, I can do it now by making both of them the UT.
No, because I had a separate reason to carve out Ladakh as a separate UT.
You may. No difficulty. That's your decision. That's why I'm saying this less complicated by its nature.